Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now before I begin, tell me where you are watching from. I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. I still remember the afternoon it happened. I was in my kitchen, rinsing teacups and listening to the soft hum of the old refrigerator when I heard a quiet knock at the door. Not urgent, not rushed, just careful. That kind of knock that makes you stop mid-motion because something about it feels different. When I opened the door, there he was. Daniel, my ex-boyfriend's son. Taller than I remembered, shoulders broader, eyes a little heavier, like he had been carrying too many thoughts for too long. He gave me a polite smile, the kind young men give when they want to appear strong, but something inside them is pulling in another direction. "Hi, Miss Carla," he said. Nobody calls me that anymore. Hearing it again stirred something gentle in me, like being reminded of a part of my life that had quietly settled into the past. I welcomed him inside, noticing how he hesitated before stepping over the threshold. The way his gaze drifted around my living room told me he was remembering things too. Old dinners, laughter from days that belonged to another chapter of my life. I asked if he wanted tea, and he nodded with a seriousness that didn't match the simplicity of the question. I could tell he wasn't here for a casual visit. We sat at the table, the sunlight falling in soft stripes across his hands. He kept rubbing a small scratch on the wooden edge, like he needed something physical to anchor himself. For a moment we didn't speak. There was a quietness between us, not uncomfortable, just full of something unspoken. I watched him breathe in slowly, preparing himself. Something in me steadied too, sensing he needed space to find the right words. "You probably think it's strange that I came by," he finally said. His voice had a gentleness I didn't expect, deeper than the last time I heard it when he was still a teenager. I told him it wasn't strange at all, though we both knew it was unusual. He gave a soft laugh, one that didn't reach his eyes. I guess I didn't know who else to talk to. That caught me. It's a powerful thing when someone chooses you as the person they can trust, even after time and distance. I leaned in a little, not to rush him, but to show him I was there. He told me he'd been thinking a lot lately, about his father, about the choices he'd made, about the people who had stayed in his life and the ones who had slipped away. He said he often thought about the years I had been with his father, and how he remembered me as the steady one, the one who never raised her voice, the one who somehow made their home feel calmer when everything else felt tense. As he spoke, I could hear the weight in his words. Not blame, not regret. Something deeper. A longing to understand the pieces of his past that still shaped him today. His eyes glistened just slightly, though he tried to blink it away. I didn't push him. I simply listened. Sometimes that's all people truly need. He took a slow breath and said, "There's something I need to tell you. Something I've never told anyone." And the moment those words left his lips, the room seemed to shift. The late afternoon sun dimmed just a little behind a cloud, casting a softer light that made the moment feel even more fragile. I didn't know what he was about to reveal, but I felt it in my chest, that whatever he carried had been sitting with him for a long time. And I could tell he chose to bring it here, to me, for a reason I didn't yet understand. I folded my hands together, nodded gently, and said, "Tell me when you're ready, Daniel. I'm listening." And that's when everything truly began. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he looked down at his hands, turning his fingers slowly as if the words he needed were hiding somewhere along his palms. The silence stretched just long enough to fill the room with a soft tension, the kind that makes you aware of every breath you take. I didn't want to interrupt him or pull him forward too quickly. Sometimes the quiet is part of the confession. When he finally lifted his eyes, there was something vulnerable in them, something I had never seen in him before, not even in the years when he was still figuring out who he wanted to become. "I came because I feel like you were the only person who ever understood him," he said softly. and maybe the only one who understood me too. The words settled on my shoulders with a weight I didn't expect. I had spent years convincing myself that my time with his father was just a closed chapter, something finished, something I didn't need to revisit. But here was Daniel, pulling that chapter back open with a quiet honesty that made the air between us feel almost delicate. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. Things with him were complicated. I know you know that. He tried, but he didn't always know how to show up. His voice tightened just slightly, betraying emotions he hadn't planned to share. When you left, I understood why. I wasn't angry, not like you said I would be. I just missed you. I felt my throat tighten. I hadn't realized he'd carried that feeling for so long. I remembered him back then, younger, quieter, observing the world with a seriousness beyond his years. I always sensed he noticed things others overlooked. I told him gently, leaving wasn't about you. It never was. You were a bright spot in that house. He closed his eyes at that, almost as if he needed to hear those words more than he expected. He took a deep breath, and his voice lowered. There's something else, and it's the real reason I'm here. He looked toward the window, like he needed a moment to steady himself. I found a letter, one he wrote years ago. It had your name on it. The room felt suddenly still. I hadn't expected that. He continued, his tone careful. He never sent it. I don't know why. Maybe he was afraid. Maybe he was too late. He reached into his jacket pocket, and for a brief second, I heard the faint crinkle of paper. But he didn't pull it out. He just held it, as if it were something fragile. When I read it, I felt like I understood things I never understood before. About him. About you. About the way everything fell apart. I stayed quiet, letting him guide the pace. He looked at me again, and in his expression I saw the weight of years, questions he had buried, emotions he had never voiced, memories that had only grown sharper in time. The letter. It changed the way I saw him, and it made me realize there was someone else I needed to talk to, someone who could help me make sense of it. His voice trembled slightly, but not from fear, more from the release of carrying something alone for too long. Carla, he said softly, there are things in that letter I don't understand, things about the way he felt, things about you. And there's something I need to tell you before I show it to you. Something I need to say out loud for the first time. My heartbeat quickened, not from fear, but from the seriousness in his tone. Whatever he had carried, it was heavy, and it was about to shape the conversation in a way neither of us had prepared for. He took one last breath, steadying himself. His eyes softened, and his voice lowered into something sincere and almost hesitant. What he wrote, it made me realize I've been holding on to feelings I never talked about. Feelings connected to you, to the way you made that house feel like a home, and I don't know what to do with that anymore. The confession lingered in the air, quiet but powerful, reaching into a part of me I hadn't touched in years. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I simply let the moment settle around us, knowing this was only the beginning of what he had come to share. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. His words settled in the quiet space between us like something too delicate to touch, but too important to ignore. I could see the conflict in his expression, the mixture of uncertainty and relief that comes when someone finally lets go of a truth they've been carrying for years. I kept my hands wrapped around my worn cup, grounding myself, giving him the space to continue at his own pace. I know it might sound strange, he said, his voice low, steady but guarded. But growing up, you were the only person who ever made the house feel calm, safe, even when things weren't easy with him. He breathed out slowly, almost like he was afraid I'd misunderstand. I guess some part of me connected that feeling with you, that sense of stability. His eyes moved to the window again, as if the fading light could help him find the right words. I felt a softness rise in me, not discomfort. Just a quiet awareness that he was trying to share something deeply personal, something shaped by years of observation and silence. I reached out just enough for him to see the gesture, not touching him, just offering presence. "It's okay," I said gently. "You can tell me what you need to." He nodded, rubbing his thumb slowly across the folded letter in his hand. "After you left, the house felt different. He was different. And I think I blamed myself for a long time. Maybe because I didn't understand what happened. Maybe because I thought if I'd been better, things might have stayed the way they were." That tugged at my heart. Children, even when they're nearly grown, carry burdens that were never meant for them. I leaned in slightly and said, "Daniel, none of what happened back then was your fault. Not any of it." He seemed to take that in slowly, like it was a truth he'd never allowed himself to consider fully. A tiny bit of tension eased from his shoulders. After a quiet moment, he continued, "When I found the letter, I read it more than once. At first because I was trying to understand him. But then I realized it wasn't just about him. It was about me too, about why I remembered you the way I did." His voice lowered again, thoughtful this time. "I think I came here because I needed to see if the person I remembered still felt the same." His words weren't romantic. They weren't reaching for anything inappropriate. They were something deeper, an emotional recognition, a sense of connection to someone who had offered him comfort during a turbulent time in his life. The kind of connection built on safety and memory, not longing. He finally unfolded the letter slowly, as if the act itself required courage. The paper was worn, edges softened, the writing faint but still readable. He placed it on the table but didn't slide it toward me yet. "There's a part of it I want to read to you," he said softly. "Not because of what it says about him, but because of what it made me realize about myself." I nodded, keeping my breathing steady, giving him every ounce of my attention. His eyes scanned the page, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of something that had lived too long in silence. "She brings peace into a room in a way I never learned how to. She sees people, really sees them. I always wanted to be better for her, but I don't know if I can." He paused, lifting his eyes to mine. There was no anger in him, no bitterness, just quiet truth. Hearing him say that made me think about how rare that kind of understanding really is. He swallowed softly, and his voice dropped to almost a whisper, and it made me realize I've been searching for that feeling ever since. The room felt warm, filled with the soft light of early evening, the kind that makes everything look a little more honest. I let his words settle in me, not rushing toward a response, not pulling away from the moment. He wasn't asking for something. He wasn't trying to replace anything. He was untangling pieces of his past, and somehow I had become the one he trusted to witness it. After a long pause, he leaned back slightly, his breath unsteady. "There's one more thing in the letter," he said. "Something he wrote that I think changes everything. But before I show you, I need to know you're ready to hear it." I steadied myself, feeling the weight of what was coming, knowing it mattered deeply to him, and maybe to me too. "Daniel," I said softly, "I'm ready." He took a slow breath, the kind that comes before a truth someone has carried for far too long. Outside, the sky had turned into that soft blue-gray that arrives just before evening settles in. It made the room feel smaller, quieter, almost suspended in time. Daniel looked down at the letter again, smoothing its worn edges with the care of someone handling something precious. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but certain. "There's a part he wrote at the very end," he said. "I didn't understand it at first, but after thinking about it, I realized it wasn't just about him. It was about me too." He hesitated, lifting the letter slightly as if weighing whether to read it aloud. He wrote, If Daniel ever finds the kind of steadiness I never could, I hope he learns to hold on to it, even if it isn't from me." The words echoed softly in the room, quiet but powerful. I felt a tightening in my chest, not from pain, but from a deep recognition of the man I once knew, a man who often struggled to say what he truly meant until it was too late. Daniel set the letter down and folded his hands together. When he looked at me, there was no confusion in his eyes anymore, only clarity. "I didn't come here for answers about him," he said slowly. "Not really. I came because reading that made something click. I realized I've been trying to understand why certain memories stayed with me when so much else faded." He paused, searching my face with a sincerity that softened the whole moment. "And it's because you were the one person who made me feel grounded when everything else felt uncertain." His voice wasn't shaky now. It wasn't hesitant. It carried a kind of steady truth that felt years in the making. I let the silence sit between us, giving him space to continue, sensing that he wasn't looking for approval, just honesty, just connection. "I know life moved on," he said. "I know things changed. But when I came here today, I realized I wasn't trying to fill anything missing from the past. I just wanted to understand the part of myself that grew because of you. The part that learned calm, patience, and how to talk about what I'm feeling." He offered a small, thoughtful smile. "I guess I needed to thank you." His words settled deep in me, warming something I hadn't realized had grown cold over time. I had spent years believing that my presence in that old house had been temporary, my influence fleeting. Yet here was a grown man telling me that something I offered had lasted far longer than I ever imagined. I reached out and gently touched the edge of the letter he placed on the table. "Daniel, I don't know if anyone ever told you this," I said softly, "but you were always braver than you realized. Even when you were quiet, even when you held things inside, you saw more than most people do." His gaze softened at that, and I watched his shoulders relax as though he'd been carrying a weight he finally understood wasn't his responsibility alone. He nodded slowly, letting the moment settle. "I think that's why I came today," he said. "Not to reopen old wounds, not to make anything complicated, just to share the part of me that you helped shape, and to let you know that what you gave me, it mattered." A warmth spread through me, not romantic, not nostalgic, something deeper. A sense of closure, of appreciation, of unexpected connection between two people whose lives once intertwined without either of them realizing how much it meant. I told him he was welcome anytime, not out of obligation or habit, but because his presence felt honest, grounded, real. The kind of presence that doesn't demand anything, just exists with sincerity. As he stood to leave, he paused at the doorway. The evening light framed him softly, the way light sometimes catches a moment you know you'll remember. He turned to me and said, "I think he wanted us to understand each other, maybe even more than he ever understood himself." I felt myself smile. Maybe so. He gave a small nod, one that carried gratitude, respect, and a quiet promise to carry forward the better parts of the past. When the door closed behind him, the house felt different, not empty, but filled with a calm that reached deep inside me. Years later, I would still remember that visit, not because of the letter, not because of the memories it stirred, but because of what Daniel gave back to me that day, the reminder that even small moments of kindness, steadiness, and presence can shape someone's life long after you've left the room. And that realization stayed with me, becoming one of the quiet truths that still lives with me to this day.